Guha's latest book, Speaking with Nature, organized by Chandigarh Literary Society and HarperCollins. Emily Dickinson once said, "The soul should always stand ajar to welcome the ecstatic experience." Before we dive into the world of words and wisdom, let me introduce our distinguished author, Dr. Guha, who needs no introduction, but I will give a short introduction. Ramachandra Guha is a historian with the soul of a storyteller, weaving the past into narratives that resonate with the present. Born and raised in the foothills of the Himalayas and shaped by the intellectually stimulating milieu of Delhi and Kolkata, he spent a lifetime exploring India's environmental, political and biographical landscapes. From the whispering forests of the unquiet woods to the sweeping chronicles of India's panoramic history in India after Gandhi, and the deeply researched two-volume biography of Mahatma Gandhi, Guha's works stand as cornerstones of modern historical scholarship. His writings, translated into more than 20 languages, have found the global readership, earning him a place among the world's most respected historians. Beyond the page, Guha has shaped minds in classrooms across the world at Stanford, Oslo, the London School of Economics, and the Indian Institute of Science. Currently, as a distinguished university professor at Priya University, Sir continues to illuminate the complexities of India's past and present. Dr. Guha's awards include the Leopold Hidi Prize of the American Society of Environmental History. No wonder Guha Sir earned a PhD on the social history of forestry in Uttarakhand, focusing on the Chipko movement. He also received the Howard Milton Prize of the British Society for Sports History, the Elizabeth Longford Prize for Historical Biography, the Sahitya Academy Award, and the Fukuoka Prize for contributions to Asian studies. He is also the recipient of an honorary doctorate in the humanities from Yale University. His accolades reflect the depth and breadth of his contributions to history, politics, and culture. Whether chronicling the life of a nation or the legacy of its greatest leaders, Dr. Guha's pen remains a bridge between scholarship and storytelling, making history not just something to be studied, but something to be felt. So let me also apprise you a little bit about the book that we are going to launch soon. In a world where environmental consciousness is often seen as a luxury of the affluent, Dr. Ramachandra Guha's work uncovers a compelling counter-narrative, one rooted not in wealth, but in necessity. Speaking with Nature rewrites the history of environmentalism by drawing attention towards a group of visionary thinkers from India long before the West awakened to ecological crisis, long before Rachel Carson's Silent Spring or the modern climate movement. 10 remarkable individuals, poets, scientists, philosophers, and activists warned of the perils of deforestation, industrialization, and the urban expansion. From Rabindranath Tagore's lyrical reflections on nature to Kumarappa's Gandhian vision of sustainable economies, from Patrick Gett's urban planning insights to the agricultural wisdom of Albert and Gabriel Howard, these pioneers articulated a philosophy that Guha Sir calls livelihood environmentalism, a view that places ecological stewardship at the heart of survival rather than privilege. Spanning more than a century and drawing from transnational currents of thought, Speaking with Nature challenges the Eurocentric narrative of environmentalism. It presents a rich, untold history of how Indian thinkers shaped global ecological discourse, offering profound lessons for today's climate crisis. Deeply researched and strikingly relevant, this book is a call to rediscover the wisdom of those who spoke with nature long before the world learned to listen. Without much ado, may we have the book launch ceremony. And in conversation with Dr. Ramachandra Guha is Ma'am Jyoti Malhotra, and I'll be introducing her as we start the discussion. Before that, let us have the book launch ceremony. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause as I invite on stage Dr. Ramachandra Guha, Ma'am Jyoti Malhotra, Dr. Sumita Mishra, IAS, as this event has been organized by Chandigarh Literary Society, which this society is a meaningful coalescence of writers, publishers, intellectuals, scholars and students committed to creating a vibrant and wholesome space for the flowering of literature and inviting literary connoisseurs for discussions. At the helm of CLS is the chairperson, Dr. Sumita Mishra, IAS, who is the Home Secretary of Haryana, a very prolific poet and writer who dons multiple roles with effortless ease and grace. Despite her immensely busy schedule, she's so nothing with breezing the balm or anything. Despite her immensely busy schedule, she squeezes out her precious time for promoting literary activities and encouraging a vibrant culture of intellectual discourse. So may I now invite Madam Sumita Mishra for her inaugural address.
Thank you, Sunela, despite the... good evening, friends. It's a pleasure to have Ramchand Guha with us. He's one of India's most acclaimed authors, historians, intellectuals. And in conversation with him will be the very dynamic editor-in-chief of the Tribune, our very own Jyoti ji. So a warm welcome from all of you and from CLS to both. Thank you. Mahatma Gandhi famously said that the earth can provide for every man's need, but not for every man's greed. And I think that itself highlights the fundamental relationship of man with nature, fundamental and now increasingly fragile. And I think this book could not be more topical, more timely, more contemporary, because I'm looking forward to read the book, but I myself have often thought that there is a very vital difference between the way the Western world relates to nature and the way Indian philosophy or Indian civilization relates to nature. In the Western mindset, it is usually man is supreme and nature itself is a handmaiden to the aspirations and needs of man. Whereas ours has always been a philosophy based more on honoring nature, on yes, taking from it, but at the same time honoring it in a way that recognizes our fundamental interdependence. A sort of philosophy that I would say is based on an understanding and recognition of a universal pran that permeates both man and nature, and that is that is why, and that is the only way we can sort of continue for both to prosper and harmonize. This book is also unique because while it highlights some of the great intellectual thinkers of the subcontinent who had focused on environmental issues in great depth much before it became fashionable, much before we were told that you could save the planet by carrying your own bamboo straw instead of using plastic straws every time you go somewhere. It talks about, I think, fundamental relationships between communities, between marginalized communities and their dependence on nature, and the whole concept of livelihood-based and need-based nature relationships is something that we need to, I think, talk more and more about, delve more and more into, and mainstream into our thinking, our own behavior patterns, and into policy making. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and with that, I don't want to be taking up the main time here. But thank you for being with us, and I hope it's going to be an extremely illuminating and engaging conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this thought-provoking address. And in conversation with Dr. Guha is Ma'am Jyoti Malhotra. In a profession where words shape the world and worldview, Jyoti Malhotra has spent 4 decades bringing stories to life with deep insight, alacrity, clarity, and fearless integrity. As the first woman editor-in-chief of the Tribune in its long-winding history of 143 years, she stands at the helm of one of India's most respected newspapers, redefining leadership in journalism. A familiar presence on BBC Radio, she has bridged audiences across borders, offering sharp analysis on the ever-evolving global landscape. With print, television and digital media under her belt, Jyoti Malhotra is more than a journalist. She is a storyteller, a trailblazer and a relentless seeker of truth in a world that needs it more than ever. Over to you, sir and ma'am. Thank you.
And the reason I say this, is because he likes to speak about things that a lot of people don't do or cannot do in the times that we live in. Just like the newspaper that I work in, the Tribune, we like to make it our business to say uncomfortable things, and Dr. Guha is part of the same, shall I say, genre. Sumita Mishra works for the Haryana government, and you talked about the celebrated environmentalists in Dr. Guha's book. But I'm just wondering why Haryana would not follow the lead that Dr. Guha has given. I mean, the kind of destruction of the Aravalis, for example, in Haryana, and I hope that Sumita, you will personally look into this now that you're the Home Secretary. But this evening is not about Sumita, nor is it about me, it's about Ram Guha. And I'd especially like to welcome you to the city of Chandigarh, a city full of trees. There is a leisure valley just opposite this space, Dr. Guha, which Corbusier, when he built this city, said that man, besides the physical sort of sustenance that he needs, also needs to sort of walk in the parks. So, your first comments about coming to Chandigarh.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you to the Chandigarh Literature Society for inviting me. It's very nice to be in conversation with Jyoti Malhotra, and I've known and admired for a very long time. This is actually only my second visit to Chandigarh. The first was when I was 11 or 12. And, so I have really no memories about that except playing cricket in a park with my cousins. But Chandigarh I associate with two people. One whom I never met, and the second was a mentor of mine. The first whom I never met, and would have been known surely to people in this room, was a certain Lieutenant General Baljit Singh, whom I used to read in the pages of a little magazine I subscribed to in Dehradun in the 60s and 70s called Newsletters for Bird Watchers. And he was a regular contributor to that, so he would have been writing about the bird life of the Aravallis. My second connection to Chandigarh, which is more meaningful to me, was that my revered teacher Gurdial Singh retired here. And Jyoti, there's a lesson that Gurdial Singh, who was in many ways the father of Indian mountaineering, a great pioneering mountaineer, a teacher who inspired, among others, Vikram Seth in his years at the Doon School, taught me a lesson when I was in my first term in the school. Now, as some of you know, I'm crazy about cricket, and had been from when I was a little boy. And when I was 11, I was playing a house match for the juniors team. And Gurdial Singh was umpire. And I was bowling. And the non-striker had taken a couple of steps outside the crease. And I had read, I knew the rules. So I whipped up the bails and I said, "How's that?" And Gurdial said, Gurdial could never pronounce my name. My full name is Ramachandra. But he only called me Ramchandar as a Gursara. So he said, "Not out, Ramchandar, very bad sportsmanship." No, that's the difference between the spirit and the letter. Honor not just the letter but the spirit. Because the letter allows you to run out someone who's taken a step, but the spirit says give him only. Right. So I was thinking of Gurdial, and he settled here, we were in touch till the end. I'm sure some people knew him. He was a very extraordinary man, you know. And when I got an award, one of the few awards I don't mention because it's a government award. And luckily it was not in the list mentioned there. But Gurdial was happy. And he sent me a card which was of Mount Carmel. And he sent me the card and said, well done, dear boy, and I'm so proud to have been a teacher. I did a headstand on that mountain 7 years before you were born. So, that's my connection to the city of Chandigarh. I'm really happy to be here on my first proper trip, I was saying to say. And hopefully the spirit of my beloved Guru, he was called Guru because he was all our Gurus. He was very, he came from a celebrated military family. I don't want to make this too much about Gurdial, but he always called himself the black sheep of the family because he didn't join the army and he also cut off his beard. But anyway, for me, Chandigarh is not so much Corbusier as it is in the place where Gurdial spent his last 4 decades. So I'm very happy.
So my first question to you is about this book, Speaking with Nature. You've written a lot about Gandhi. Of course, environment is one of your early loves, but tell us, why did you write this book?
So I wrote this book, I started on this book 4 decades ago. As was mentioned, my PhD was in the social history of peasants in Uttarakhand and the Chipko movement. And after I finished my PhD, I spent a year as a postdoc in America. And in a library in America, I discovered the writings of 2 remarkable Indians. And this often happens, that American libraries is where you discover stuff that's actually originally published in India and which Indian libraries have not archived properly. The writings of a Gandhian economist called J.C. Kumarpal, who talked really about decentralized grassroots development, management of common property resources, water conservation, integrating, critiques of chemical fertilizers and warnings that chemical agriculture would destroy the environment in the 30s and 40s. And so him and a scholar called Radhakamal Mukherjee, who was a sociologist who taught at Lucknow University for many decades, and Dr. Mishra is shaking her head, and advocated a kind of integrated approach to understanding human beings in nature, where you would draw on the insights from natural sciences and social sciences. So I read their works, and I thought there's an interesting intellectual prehistory to contemporary environmentalism. I'm living in the age of Chipko, Narmada, the Kerala fisher folk struggle, but in the 30s and 40s, some intellectuals were warning us against the destructive pathway of industrialization we finally adopted. And I started probing further, and I came up with half a dozen names, and I thought I should write a book on them, a kind of a complement to what I had already done. And then I got distracted about Indian history and then on Gandhi, and I took a long detour, long means even in terms of time, a 2-decade detour. And then during the pandemic, when all of us were marooned at home, I returned to the notes I had taken in the 80s and 90s on these pioneering thinkers. And I realized that I did a fair amount of work, and if I just, after the pandemic ended, did a few months more work, I could probably write a useful book. So in a sense, this started as a pre-Chipko history, and it became eventually, because of when I finished it, a pre-climate change history as well. And then I stumbled upon these 10 people. On each of them, there was interesting, unusual, rich material available to flesh out their ideas and show, I hope, with some credibility that they were indeed early environmentalists. But so it's kind of a return after many decades to the first area of my research.
Now you talked about the Gandhians in this book, and there are a few, right? There's Kamarappa, there's Madeleine, or Meera. Very relevant too, perhaps.
Yeah.
But there's K. Munshi, who you call the first Hindutva environmentalist.
Yeah.
First of all, why do you say that? And what's Rabindranath Tagore got to do with K. Munshi, although both of them, in a sense, K. Munshi talks about the Van Mahotsav, and so does Tagore in his own way. But apart from that very tenuous link, what does one man have to do with the other?
So, what the link is that they, in different ways, they talked about human attitudes towards nature in a serious, rigorous way, but with different inflections. And environmentalism it's a large, capacious tent. And if you try and marry if you try and look at the relationship of environmentalism with political philosophies, you can find a conservative environmentalism, you can find a liberal environmentalism, you can find a radical environmentalism, and you can even find a feminist environmentalism. Right. So I wanted to show all the colors of the environmental rainbow. And what is interesting about Munshi and Tagore is that they were both celebrated in fields other than environmentalism. So Tagore is known as a poet, a playwright, an institution builder, someone who inspired Gandhi, Nehru, and Tagore, who was the first Asian to win a Nobel Prize in any language, as someone who became a pioneering artist in his 70s, a world. So, but his environmental thought had been ignored or underplayed. Munshi's environmental, and again, Munshi is actually a considerable figure. How one looks at his politics. Here is a man who is Bombay's foremost lawyer, Gujarat's best-selling novelist, a key architect of the Indian Constitution, someone who is, so at that there is this other side to him, where unlike Tagore is a kind of environmentalist from his childhood. He's writing about the trees, he sees his first trip, I quote in his book, early trip he took to Dalhousie, which is now in Himachal, right? And how the landscape, the rivers, the trees. So Tagore's kind of an environmentalist from very early on, then he integrates it in his education in Shantiniketan, then he integrates it in his politics. In my view, Tagore is the first thinker to show that Western imperialism was not just a system of political and economic domination, but also ecological exploitation of Asia and Africa. So Tagore argues a lifelong environmentalist with many facets to his environmentalism. Munshi is an opportunistic environmentalist. So he's a Gujarati novelist with a particularly, dark view of Muslim rulers and maybe an excessively benign view of Hindu rulers. He's a great constitutionalist, famous and lawyer with a hugely lucrative practice. And then he becomes minister in the Nehru government in 1950, and it's kind of a concession to Patel because he was close to Patel. And Munshi would have thought someone like Munshi would either become education minister or maybe law minister, but Maulana Azad was education minister, Ambedkar was law minister. So he's assigned this ministry of forest and agriculture and food and agriculture, which forest is one of the domains. And he decides now to marry his religion with his environmentalism and start Vana Mahotsava and talk about excessively romantic way about how our scriptures were all about protecting forests and Krishna was born in a grove and that's why we need to do. And he uses a very casteist language to talk about. He's telling merchants, contribute to my fund because I'm a Brahmin and you have to listen to what Brahmins. So it's a very interesting case of a right-wing environmentalism, but very passionately and compellingly argued because he was a great writer. So, and it gives the book a kind of a more rounded approach. You see, it's often interesting, not interesting, it's often salutary and necessary for a historian to write about people with whose views he does not necessarily agree, and to write about them with some empathy and understanding, not simply debunk, to reconstruct their views. So I thought that's why I must include Munshi as well.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about this chapter which you call Dissenting Scientists. Now Albert and Gabriel Howard, and the strap says Albert and Gabriel Howard and the quest for an ecological architecture. Now, this is again a couple who come to India, but actually the reason I was struck by Albert Howard is because he comes to India, he travels across then undivided India, of course, and then he writes about the farmers of Punjab. And Ram, we are in the middle of this sort of crisis which doesn't seem to be ending. The farmers' protest that has gone on and on and on for so many months now. And even today we're arguing about whether the farmer leaders have, sort of broken their fast or not. But whatever that is and whatever that story is about. But this paragraph is so moving in a way, and if you don't mind, I'll just read a couple of lines. As he himself wrote of the farmers of Punjab, many terms are used to describe the physical character of the soils. Thus, Niai's rich land around the homestead. Heavy clay soils are termed Dakar, Chamb, and the heaviest clays on which rice only can be grown are termed Rakar. The best soils in the Punjab are well-drained loams known as Rohi. The lighter loams are called Rosli, and the sandy soils which grow only millets are known as Bhur or Maira. Tibba is almost pure sand, and Reti is a soil with wind-blown hillocks of sand. Now, I'm not sure if anybody here in the audience even recognizes any of those words.
Yeah.
Do any of you recognize those words? Do you, Sumita? It's so, it's, I think, the older people, but perhaps,
Yeah.
I don't know if we've lost that vocabulary, but why Gabriel and Albert Howard?
So because two reasons. One is, several reasons. One is I've always had a fascination with dissenting foreigners. I wrote a biography of very relevant figures again in this book. I wrote a book called Rebels Against the Riot, which is about foreigners who joined the freedom struggle. And that book is dedicated to Jean Dresse, who understands the Indian economy better than any Kalu, any of us Kalus, who's a Belgian who settled in India. And I always, because I'm very resistant to black and white portraits of colonialism, The British were always bad, and now we of course know the Mughals are only bad. So I've always been dissenting, people who went against the grain. And they went against the grain in several respects. One was that they were against narrow specialization. So they worked in the Colonial Agricultural Research Service, and they found it was so specialized. Somebody looked at the roots, somebody looked at the stalk, somebody looked at the flower, and they said you have to have an integrated approach, and you have to look at all parts of the plant, and you have to look at soil and water and climate, and I think that's what they were, in a sense, they had an ecological approach. And they also recognized early on the limits of chemicalized agriculture, much more systematic than Kumarappan, because they were scientists. And of course, we needed the Green Revolution. I'll start with that. I think the Green Revolution saved India, not just economically, but politically, because if those hybrid seeds had not been designed, if the farmers of areas like Punjab, Western Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and a few selected areas had not been given the mandate to radically increase their productivity. I remember this, some of you would remember it. I grew up in the 60s, so I remember the scarcity in the family. And the Green Revolution safeguarded our food security, but also our political independence, where we will become clients of America, right? So, but at some stage, we had to go beyond that. And some visionary scientists today, such as the late M.S. Swaminathan, who was an architect of the Green Revolution, but then recognized that he had to adopt, or his team had to adopt a much more ecological approach, which is why he talked about biovillages. So the Howards are anticipating this understanding. They are also pioneering a method of composting that is used across the world, but very little in India. And finally, because it's an interesting case study of a man and a woman married, devoted to the research, where the man gets an excessive share of the credit. Now, this is a kind of common thing in many fields, where it's often easier when a couple both are working, but one is in a different field. Say there is a lawyer and a bureaucrat, or an artist and a scientist. But so I realized that actually all the writings I was reading were only about Albert, and there was a passing reference to Gabriel. But Gabriel actually had a much more profoundly ecological approach, and she did fieldwork in Balochistan in the 1910s. I mean, just think of a solitary woman doing fieldwork there. So that's kind of the kind of reason I wanted to include them. And one of the interesting things about this book, Jyoti, is that they tell you, right? Now, people in this room, including Professor Vatas, would know, so the really good architects and urban conservationists know about Patrick Ellis. So my chapter on Patrick Ellis, for a specialist, gives them maybe 10% or 20% more than they know. But others they don't know about. But someone who's worked in, shall we say, only in forests, has no clue about Patrick Ellis. So the interesting thing about the reaction to this book is different. Like you say, why the Howards? Somebody says, hey, but Geddes was surprised. Right? So I think what I'm trying to show is that the range of people who worked in different domains. They worked in the wilderness, the forest, the farm, the village, they worked on water, they worked on energy, they worked on transport, they worked in cities. And in a sense, though, there's one last thing I'd say, though I insist, as a historian, my job is to document and analyze, not to prescribe. A historian is not a policymaker. And that is, a historian cannot advise governments, and a historian can't even advise activists directly. But activists and policymakers can glean their own lessons from this book.
Which brings us to Geddes.
Huh?
Which brings us to Patrick Geddes. Now you said you like men who go against the grain, and he's one of them. An ecological environmentalist.
Yeah.
Now you know, Gandhi, your favorite person, is sort of known to say that India lives in its villages.
Yeah.
But does India live in her villages? And Patrick Geddes is expanding that argument.
Absolutely. And this goes back to again my early work. So if those of us who remember the 80s and the 90s, I mean the two iconic environmental movements, grassroots environmental movements that married sustainability with social justice were Chipko and Narmada. They were both in the countryside. We look at slightly lesser known movements, which are known maybe not as visible or well known as Chipko and Narmada, the Kerala Fisher Folk struggle, the anti-mining movements in Orissa, the Save the Western Ghats movement. They all are again away from the cities. And you could say that Indian environmentalists took some clues from Gandhi that were helpful, and that was unhelpful. That the activists of the 80s and 90s turned their back on the city just as Gandhi did. Now it's interesting that Gandhi was shaped by the city. Without London, without Bombay, without Ahmedabad, without Johannesburg, there would be no Gandhi. So I felt that given that India is now becoming more and more of an urban civilization, India lives, Gandhi said India lives in her villages, but India has always lived in her cities too, and now of course it lives more and more in her cities and towns, which is where Geddes' ideas about how to make the cities habitable, socially and environmentally, become so strikingly pressing.
And that brings me to Gandhi's Englishwoman and the passionate environmentalist of Madeline Slade. She is everywhere in your books.
Yeah.
You're particularly fond of her.
I'm fond of her, and many years ago, I can tell this story. Many years ago, I wrote a column about her, maybe 20 odd years ago, before I did Gandhi or anything else. And I said, she really deserves a biography on her own, an admiral's daughter who leaves it all, comes to live with Gandhi, works with him, then leaves Gandhi, falls in love, is rejected, then starts an ashram in the Himalaya, then leaves the Himalaya, spends 10 years there, then goes to Vienna. So I wrote, and I said there, and this might abuse you, Jyoti, I said, I know the person who should try and write this book, and I will try and persuade her. I ended my column in the Hindu with these words more than 20 years ago, and that person was someone I'm sure you know, Rajni Bakshi, who had just written a lovely book called Bapu Kuti. And I was unsuccessful in persuading her to take up that book. I
sent her a message.
Sent her a message to her. But she is absolutely fascinating. There are so many aspects to her. And her environmentalism is one of them. I mean, other things that are not here, but which are written about elsewhere. Because she was, Gandhi was a very canny man. So because she was so upper class, she's an admiral's daughter who joins Gandhi. In 1934, after the Round Table Conference had failed, Gandhi sent her to lobby for Indian freedom. An English woman wearing khadi, representing Gandhi, because she, given whose daughter she was, Churchill gave her an audience. She talked to Eleanor, she stayed with Eleanor Roosevelt in the White House. So she's an absolutely fascinating figure. In this book I only talk about one aspect of her work. But I hope someone one day writes a full book on her. Maybe there should be a film about her. She's an incredibly interesting person.
So, Ram, you do the cunning thing. You don't write overtly about politics, but actually every sentence is imbued with not just the politics of the time, of the person that you write about, but also of today, isn't it? Whether it's Madeline and you're talking about her politics and the politics of the time, of Gandhi, of the Raj, and then what that means to India.
Yeah. So this is obviously a book that is certainly sending a political message, but the main,
Which is what?
No, but that's not the core.
Okay.
That's not the core. The core of the book is as follows. That the core argument of the book, is as follows. India faces a colossal environmental crisis that is independent of climate change. So air pollution across northern India has nothing to do with climate change. The depletion of groundwater aquifers, not least in Punjab, has nothing to do with climate change. The loss of biodiversity has nothing to do with climate change. And all of these, the death of our rivers has nothing to do with climate change. Climate change makes it worse. But all these problems raise a huge question mark about the sustainability of our economic model. And no government, whether BJP or Congress or DMK or TMC or whatever, or Aam Aadmi Party or whatever have you, they just sidestep it because they don't find it electorally profitable. But it will come, it will devour it. It will, and that's why you have to start thinking very seriously about forging a model of environmentally sustainable social and economic development. And we do have the intellectual resources to forge that model, both in the past and in the present. If you look at the scientific expertise we have in most of our research institutes today, who are never consulted by governments. Urban planners, agronomists, soil scientists are virtually never consulted by government. So that is the core of the book. There is obviously, it is at one level, but you're right, obviously my broader philosophy or political philosophy, which is inclusive, which values democracy, which values pluralism, which is not xenophobic. I detest those who detest everything foreign, because the greatest Indians, Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, Tagore, all drew from their travels across the world. Right? And this kind of xenophobic nationalism that is rampant today, I think is destructive to us, even in an intellectual sense, which is why out of the 10 figures in this book, 5 are born overseas. So, but those messages are, you could say, Indian. The core is an argument about taking the environmental challenges we face.
But how is this going to devour India? How is this environmental?
Because you will find, like Bangalore where I live, will become uninhabitable because we won't have water. The Punjab farmers are facing the crisis that excessive chemicalized agriculture has done to it. It is air pollution across our northern cities debilitates young people, their health, the livelihoods of their parents. So it's exacting a huge economic, health, livelihood cost already, and it's simply not sustainable. I don't believe that there's a technological quick fix that will solve it. The only technological quick fix that will solve it, as one geneticist kind of facetiously told me, is that we now have the capacity to engineer human beings who do not grow more than 2 feet, but have the brilliance of the most brilliant scientists. So we can still dominate the rest of creation, but our cars are so big and our houses are that big, because materially we cannot sustain the globalization of American standards of consumption. And that's what India and China is trying to do. That's why my epigraph is from Gandhi, where he says, if India continues like this, it will strip the world bare like locusts, and that's what India and China are doing. So that's what I believe, that it is an existential crisis. It may come to hit us in 30 years, 40 years, 100 years, but it will come finally.
How relevant is what Gandhi says to India today? We are in 2025. The man died in, even he realized he was irrelevant already in 1948.
But you could see, I think his broader environmental philosophy is relevant. He doesn't have actionable ideas for us to implement, but the idea that there are biophysical limits to economic growth, that economic growth based on heavy resource extraction cannot continue for more than, shall we say, a few more generations. I'm convinced that aspect, that we have to remodel, rethink what we mean by it.
Now the other thing about these men and women that you've picked, Verrier Elwin for example, the reason, I like Verrier Elwin is because he also tells Nehru that his policies and his plans vis-a-vis India's tribal population just don't work. But he had the courage to tell India's Prime Minister that, he's sort of the blue-eyed boy of the country. But he tells him off.
Yeah, of course. And most of these are, they are, I do not like the cliche phrase, speaking truth to power. But they're speaking the truth. And again, that is the Gandhian legacy. That's also Gandhian legacy. They speak the truth, however uncomfortable it is. Tell the Hindus that their treatment of women and Dalits is despicable. Even the Hindus don't want to hear it. Tell the Hindus later on that if you want to build a country that is safe and prosperous, you have to live harmoniously and peaceably with your fellow Muslims, even though the Hindus don't want to hear it in 47. So in that sense, all of these people are clear about what, based on not based on opinion, based on rigorous research, based on years of living with people or studying, a particular set of natural phenomena. They have the intellectual rigor and intellectual honesty. And even if that costs them, positions, if it costs them popularity, so be it.
So very real guy. Tell us a little bit more about him.
So, again, Elwin this is the one, actually Elwin is the person who means, in some ways of this book means most to me, because he changed my own life. I don't say this here, but I was an English, I have friends here in the audience who will recall that when I was a student in St. Stephen's College, I was utterly mediocre in economics, which is what I was registered to do. And while I was doing my master's in economics, I read Elwin, his autobiography, which is a gorgeously written book, which also won the Science Academy Award. And I decided, sociology, anthropology, history is where maybe is more congenial to me. And then I went to Calcutta and did a PhD in sociology and then moved to history. And then when I worked on forest, there was Elwin. And when I looked at dissenting foreigners who came to India, there was Elwin. And Elwin wrote beautifully too. So as a writer, I admire someone who wrote such gorgeous prose. And in this book, of course, I wanted someone, so this book is about people in the cities, people and environments in the cities, in the villages, which are mostly Hindu caste villages. And Elwin, in a sense, represented the Adivasis of both central India and the northeast. And that crucial group of Indians, I thought were important to represent in this book through someone who had studied their life, their culture, their relationship to the forest so thoroughly over so long, and hence Elwin.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ram Guha. The floor is open for your questions. So do get a mic, ask your questions, tell me who you are, and anyone? Okay, the lady in the orange shirt. Okay, you go ahead.
Wait for the mic.
You said somewhere that historians are not.
What's your name and what do you do?
Riya Sethi, I'm a student only, studying. So I'm aspiring to be an officer, and you very simply put it that we need to reshift our development paradigm, and India is at a crossroads where we are hitting our demographic dividend. So, and unemployment is a crisis.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as you said, if you don't see that our environment is in danger, then we are projected for doom. So how do you balance all of this? And the second nuance I wanted you to bring in this was that you said that we should draw from international frontiers, right?
International?
Frontiers, international lessons.
Ideas. It's not be close to the world.
Yeah. So sir, right now what is happening is India was at the forefront of doing the climate change.
You should ask your question. Just ask your question.
Okay.
Yeah. The first part, let me ask the first part.
Yeah.
So first part, which is how do we square the circle between assuring a decent life to the majority of Indians? So decent schools, decent hospitals, employment opportunities, and so on. And how do we do this without destroying the basis of human existence, which is nature, right? And in India, the problem is particularly acute because we have much higher population densities in the West, we have more fragile ecologies. Unlike them, we cannot conquer other countries, the way Europe conquered Asia and Africa, or the way the Europeans went to North America and committed genocide of the indigenous population and then with the help of slaves did what they did. Now, as I said earlier on in my answer to Jyoti's questions, as a historian, I can analyze, document, but not prescribe. But the many people who can prescribe. We have an outstanding set of young environmental economists. There's a network called SANDI, South Asian Network of Development and Environment. Right. Now, there are people in every good university in India, as well as institute, who can, in particular areas, whether it's forest, whether it's agriculture, whether it's housing, whether it's transport, whether it's energy, can help move us towards a more sustainable path. But our governments are knowledge-proof. I mean, that is, in these respects, there are many reasons for this. One is that there is a short-term time horizon, which is 5 years you want to win an election, you have to show you to promise the moon. You can't say plan for 50 years. A second reason, and with due respect to Dr. Mishra, is that this is a government run by journalists. Right? I mean, any real domain expert is always treated with condescension by, both the bureaucrats and by the politicians. But the important thing to recognize is that we do have this domain expertise. Finally, what I already said is that climate change is often used to divert attention. Because it is true, the West is hypocritical. It is true that the West, and particularly America, contributed a disproportionate share of greenhouse gases in the past. But that has got nothing to do with the groundwater depletion in Punjab, with air pollution in Delhi, with Bangalore's dependence on the waters of the Sharavati, which are in the Western Ghats, because it can't really do anything else. So I said there is. I just want to. This book it tells you that people reflected on these questions in the past. Those, as Jyoti rightly says, what someone wrote, what Patrick Geddes wrote about Indian cities in the 1920s, is not directly applicable to what the status of Indian cities in the 2020s. But I think it's so long as the recognition comes that this is a crisis as significant as any other crisis we face. I mean, there are other crises too. I mean, there is a crisis of federalism, which Punjab raised a very long time ago, and now, states in South India are raising. There's a crisis of minority rights, there's a crisis of gender equality. So there are lots of issues that our democracy has to reflect upon and ponder upon, but the environmental challenges are as important as any other, and I wish they would get more.
And connected with all of it.
And connected, absolutely, and connected with all of it, yeah.
The lady at the back, in orange.
Hi, I'm myself Preetinder. I'm into research, and my first question is, I would like to know, like in Punjab, we are facing a lot of paddy stubble burning, which is like how we would counter with it.
So I don't have an answer to that, but I can tell you that there are economists working who have technical and economic answers. I mean, I don't know if anyone here. There may be people who work in agriculture here who are more knowledgeable.
And the second question is, like, we have the industries and they are just depleting our groundwater, like there's mixing of some...
So anyway, I think, as I said, on concrete issues I can't answer. I'm not, shall we say, a problem solver of that kind. But this book will give you a sense of how other people have thought about these questions and how they are reflected on and anticipated many of the problems that we're talking about.
Thank you, sir. I will read it and then I will go into it.
Okay. We need to bring the mic in front, please. Isn't there another mic? Open mic. Give it a mic.
Hello sir. So my name is Dr. Ankur Garg. And sir, I personally think that rural India and traditional society have been better able to preserve nature because they tend to anthropomorphize it. In every rock, tree, stream, they see deity. But as we become more educated, as we develop scientific temper, we tend to detach from nature. So how do we deal with this dilemma?
No, I think, again, you see, I said I don't believe in binary black and white thinking. It is true that rural communities and tribal communities, because they live close to nature, they have an understanding of what the limits were and what they could not push against. At the same time, they had deep caste and gender hierarchies too. I think what modernity has brought to them was to show that you cannot treat women and the rest like that, right? So the real challenge is to how to blend ecology and equity, the issue of social justice and individual rights. So I think that's really, technology can also help. I mean, I don't want to say anti-technology. Technology can help, but the first step is to recognize that this is a fundamental challenge Indian society faces today. That we cannot continue, and probably it's a challenge that the globe faces. There is, it is entirely possible that in 100 years the human race would have committed collective suicide. So that's, I think, the first step, and then we can.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Gentleman at the back in the check shirt, yeah. Isn't there another mic?
Must be, I really don't look at the mics.
I have a picture. Yeah.
Hello sir, I'm Gulraj, I'm an engineer. So just broader related to the environment theme, I just wanted to get your opinion. Do you think that there's a need to change how the international realm is looking at environmental cooperation? Because currently what it resembles is a prisoner's dilemma, right? Where the benefits of defection by one country, like they outweigh the benefits of adhering to the,
That's
right?
yeah.
Sorry.
No doubt. And in this I'd say that it's, now of course Trump has gone back on Paris. But if you look at it over the last 30 years, the principal guilty party are the Americans. I think Europeans have been much more proactive in this. In 1995 in Berlin, incidentally a summit organized by Angela Merkel, who's one of the most underrated modern politicians. Though a conservative, technically in terms of a party affiliation, more progressive than many so-called politicians on the left. So I think in the 1990s, the Europeans were willing to voluntarily submit to cuts. But the Americans bought a cut. So absolutely, that is the issue. But again, while the threat of global climate change hangs over all of us, particularly those, the Himalayas certainly, you are not far from the Himalayas with depleting glaciers, our coasts, where even in terms of regular weather patterns, you don't know when the monsoon will come, not come. At the same time, many environmental activists, especially younger activists, for them it is all about climate change. But it's not about this vast, we have to be equally attentive to the vast array of domestically generated environmental challenges. That of course impact our economic growth prospects.
So, do you think, basically, if we can restructure the international negotiations towards, let's say,
No, you are making me into a superhuman being, a god.
I would love to,
Let me say to you, Jyoti is not so international. Somebody will restructure the permanent membership of Security Council.
That's not fair. But I have another question. Do you want to give your mic back to whoever next is asking the question?
But you want to say something?
No, but I don't. But I have another question for you, which is, the whole Gandhi versus Ambedkar argument. It's not a question that is relevant to your book.
Yeah.
But Gandhi, who sort of romanticizes the villages, and Ambedkar sort of disses him, right? As scorns him. Now, how do you look at that vis-a-vis the environmentalist sort of argument?
Ambedkar was right that the Dalits cannot find emancipation within the village, as it was then. He was absolutely right. So, in the cities, you are anonymous. You are stigmatized by where you live and what your traditional caste occupation was. But at the same time, Gandhi was present in recognizing this question of limits. So, and as I said in answer to the question here, the gentleman here was talking about traditional societies living. So, in a sense, in some ways we need a combination of both, and attentiveness to caste and gender equity, and attentiveness to sustainability. And again, you would have to draw different thinkers. Again, I think it's very important. One of the reasons this book has 10 is, I think, obviously, it's always a mistake to think that one thinker, however great, provides all the answers. I am a scholar of Gandhi. I've spent many decades studying Gandhi, but I'm not a Gandhian. Marx famously said, "I am not a Marxist," as you remember, right? And Ambedkar today might actually be saying, "I am not an Ambedkarite," right? Because people will have us. So I think Ambedkar was right that, Annihilation of Caste is a 60-page book which every Indian should read. It's a fabulous critique of the caste system. But I think Ambedkar and Nehru were fascinated by big dams, big steel plants, big factories, and
Rightly so, because
at that time, after part, right. But now we can see the limits of some of that. So in a sense, Gandhi, at least from an ecological point of view, Gandhi maybe was more present.
there's time for a question. Yes, of course. We have a couple of minutes more. Go ahead.
My name is Rumina Sethi. I'm a professor at Punjab University, and I have read a lot of what you write. Not that much really, but you are a historian. You have a PhD in sociology.
Yeah.
And I have been thinking about the conversations that go on in the university, for example, where there is a lot of discussion about entrepreneurship, startups, academia, industry partnerships. In view of that, I often find myself thinking, what about social sciences? Because when we speak about environmentalism, and when we are thinking about models of sustainability, I think that the people who are working in social sciences are far more relevant today. And although, if I just may take another moment, although there was this, declaration made a little while ago that Gandhi has become irrelevant today, but I think to a very large extent this whole aesthetics of slowness, which was part of Gandhi's personality and his semiotics of dressing, discarding all the Western wear, was also a kind of a message about sustainability, not to rely on these Western models of mobility and connectivity, which have become, buzzwords today for our younger generation. So I find myself thinking, and I thought that as a social scientist, how could you respond to the status of social sciences in the academic system today in India?
Professor Sethi, your questions are both absolutely fascinating. I'll answer the second first, and then come to the first one. So what you described very aptly as the aesthetics of slowness. Some years ago I was giving a talk in Phoenix in Arizona, which is it's like LA, it's only cars. And the mayor of Phoenix was trying to promote public transport. So he was putting more buses, more trams. And the tagline of his campaign was, Gandhi walked. Right? Which is a bit, of course, Gandhi walked because that's the best way to know the country. But clearly, Gandhi also traveled by train. He should have said Gandhi also traveled. So the aesthetics of slowness, obviously, not everyone could live like Gandhi. But moderation, restraint, I think is one very important aspect of the Gandhi message. Your first is a more intellectual question. I would not say in the search for sustainability, I would not say social sciences are more important, because that will become a kind of a partisan tribal view. They are as important. And the thinker in this book, who really expresses that fabulously, is Radhakamal Mukherjee. As you know, in our universities, we have a very fragmented approach to knowledge. The sociologist rarely talks to the historian and vice versa. And neither ever talks to the physicist or the chemist or the soil scientist. And particularly when it comes to the ecological challenge, you need an integrative approach. And it's not, so I think that's where the social sciences and the natural sciences, you need them both. And Radhakamal Mukherjee is saying this, in the 30s. He's advocating this integration of knowledge for particularly the ecological domain. And I think that's really makes it absolutely striking. And it's interesting, he's writing in Lucknow, which is a kind of a backwater. It's not, Delhi or Calcutta, let alone London, no. And he writes an article in 1923 in the American Journal of Sociology called An Ecological Approach to Sociology. It's extraordinary. So, and today it is this bringing in all the disciplines, particularly when it comes to the environmental challenge, is so crucial.
Okay, I guess we've run out of questions. Does anybody else have a question? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I speak out loud?
Yes, just speak it up.
Sure. Hello, sir. Yep. Thanks
Come
for
this side, I can't see you to the right.
Is it all right now?
Yeah.
So thanks for praising our city. I'm Aman. I'm a student here. So you started off the talk with an interesting remark about K.M. Munshi as one of the early proponents of right-wing environmentalism in India. At the same time, often today, right-wingers are often critiqued for wreaking havoc on the environment. So, how do you see the relationship?
There's a kind of there's a contradiction. On the one hand, free market economics, excessively free market, unencumbered free market economics promote the right, destroys the environment. On the other hand, you have a claim that Hindus always knew how to protect nature. And Munchy articulates that claim. Now even that, actually if you look at the, forget the practice of Hinduism, forget the state of the Ganga outside Banaras today, forget that. Or forget the state of the forest of the Himalaya where I am. But even in theoretical terms, or not even in textual terms, it is true that you will find some verses in ancient Hindu scriptures talking about the beauties of forests. You will also find a core passage in the Mahabharata glorifying the burning of the Khandava forest. Right. So I believe, in my view, environment. This is a view that may go against the grain of some of the remarks today, made by others, not by me. I believe environmentalism is a completely modern phenomenon. Don't look for ancient scriptures. You may find it. You will not find it in high religion. You may find it in the everyday practice of peasants and tribals. And how in their daily life, in their wish to assure a kind of at least a safe present for their children, they were responsible. But more than that, it's an intellectual, scientific approach that is integrated, that is holistic, that draws on different disciplines to understand how human beings are dealt with nature. So, but Munchy played on this, that Hindus, and you will find there's a kind of competitive religious environmentalism. So the Buddhists will say, no, it's not the Hindus, it is us. The Buddha was born in a forest, he achieved enlightenment under a Bodhi tree, he practiced the middle way. The Christian will tell you that in this verse of the Bible, it's all about stewardship. Man is a steward for the rest of creation. So it's like, I think it's a mistake to look to religion as a cure for any current problem. Let it be the person and their relationship with their God, but let it not go beyond.
Right. You have another question, or are you another? Okay.
Just one last quick question.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
I'll talk after.
Okay.
So it might seem like a naive question.
Yeah.
By profession I'm a massage therapist, I'm a yoga therapist.
Yeah.
And like you talked about Rabindranath.
Ask your question.
Yeah.
Just ask a question.
You talked about Rabindranath Tagore, like he being an environmentalist from childhood, like that being in him, like that quality being inside of him. So I've also felt that when I was a little child.
Okay, you need to ask your question, young lady.
So sorry, I'm just getting to the point.
No, you have to ask the question now.
So I just want to ask if someone has to. I call myself an artist because I explore these fields, but if someone has to get into the field of environmentalism, what kind of study or a professional career would you suggest for a person like me?
I think
you should read the Tribune every morning.
That's not true. I say this, that the kids, young people like you today, are much luckier than Jyoti and I when we were your age, because there's much more in the schools than there ever was when we were young. So,
Thank you.
I think we have to wind it up here, but I just want to thank the audience and to say to you, Dr. Guha, that this is a really dedicated audience that came to listen to you today. Over to you, young lady.
It has been an absolute delight. Am I audible?
Yes.
Listening to both of you and the interesting and engaging discussion that has followed. So it's my privilege and honor to deliver the vote of thanks for today's insightful and stimulating book discussion between Dr. Ramachandra Guha and Ma'am Jyoti Malhotra. First and foremost, sir, a heartfelt thank you to you, your in-depth knowledge of and passion for environmental history have left us all enriched. Your ability to weave historical narratives with contemporary relevance is truly remarkable, and today's discussion has once again reaffirmed why you remain one of India's most celebrated public intellectuals, deeply anchored in your cultural and environmental belief systems. A special thanks to Ma'am Jyoti Malhotra for her incisive questions and engaging moderation. Her journalistic acumen and ability to frame complex ideas in a compelling manner added immense depth to the conversation. I think I'm better audible now, but anyhow. To our esteemed audience, your presence and thought-provoking questions have made this session even more meaningful. Engaged listeners and inquisitive minds are what keep the spirit of intellectual discourse alive. I also extend my gratitude to Dr. Sumita Mishra, IAS and President, Chairperson of Chandigarh Literary Society, for her efforts and undying zeal in bringing to life the discussion forums and engaging conversations in the Tri-City, and also for kindling the flame of a rich intellectual discourse among the literary enthusiasts and aficionados. I also want to take a moment to thank everyone behind the scenes who worked tirelessly to make this event a success. From logistics to promotions, their dedication ensured a seamless experience for us all. Lastly, as we conclude this session, let us carry forward the ideas and discussions from today reflecting on history, ecology and the larger questions of sustainability that shape our world. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and sir's books are available outside, so it will be followed by book signing. Thank you everyone for your presence and support.